Good morning. It's a question so many people ask. How is it possible that a shooter got so close to former President Trump during a rally in Pennsylvania in July that shooter was able to fire multiple times before being taken down? Two Senate committees looking into that released a preliminary report on what went wrong. It happened this past Wednesday. Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal is co-chair of one of those committees and joins us this morning. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning. Great to be with you.
This is a wide-ranging investigation. I looked at some of what the committee put out. So many interviews and sources and documents, hundreds of documents being reviewed. Just from 40,000 feet, what's the takeaway from this?
The clear takeaway from this report is that what happened on July 13th was an accumulation of errors that produced a perfect storm of stunning failure. Part of it was lack of resources. No drone detection system, no working radio, no counter surveillance unit. And it was fully preventable, shocking, unacceptable, but all of it could have been stopped if, for example, the roof had been subject to surveillance, if the protective detail with the former president had been alerted that there was a suspicious individual with a rangefinder out there. There were literally a series of errors that produced this almost successful assassination attempt.
With all your years in politics, you've been inside security perimeters at all sorts of events many times. Those of us in the media have certainly been involved in being taken inside there as well. When you saw it, because I know just from my perspective, having covered many rallies like that, you see it, you see the rooftop in question. What was your first reaction when you saw the report of where that shooter was compared to where former President Trump was?
I was absolutely astonished and appalled that that shooter was permitted to get within that sight range of the President of the United States, but especially since he was cited earlier and they could have held the president, former president, before he went onto the stage while they were looking for this suspicious individual. So there was a breakdown in communication. Part of it, technology, no working radio, no coordination or communication between state, local, and federal law enforcement. And I think there has to be a really soul-searching, top-to-bottom review of Secret Service practices and protocols and a house cleaning of management at the top of that agency. Because we're going to provide money, $231 million in this continuing resolution. But more than money is needed here. It's management.
It almost sounds, when you look at some of the details as I look through that report, I mean, some of it sounds almost unbelievable. You mentioned the drones at the beginning. One of the drone operators was on the phone with like the 800 support help for the drone because he couldn't get it to work at the time this was all happening. You talk about the resources, but like you said, it's more of a systemic failure. The radios didn't talk to each other. They didn't have coordination, and they had to call 800 help for the drone.
It is truly shocking that the Secret Service, protecting some of the most powerful people in the world, should be calling an 800 help number for technology assistance when the system was completely inoperable. And it wasn't just any old system, it was their radios that enabled them to communicate with each other. So that's why I think that it's more than just resources, which is important for the Secret Service to have. It's also management and leadership. You know, the head of a corporation, the platoon leader in the military, the quarterback on a football team, all can be pinpointed for responsibility. It just didn't happen on that day. Nobody was in charge.
Moving forward, obviously, since that July incident, we've seen another incident where someone with a rifle was found at the Trump golf course more recently. Are you concerned, and you know, this is a bipartisan committee, a couple of Republicans, a couple of Democrats chairing the different efforts here. Whoever the next president is, whoever the president after that is, this is an issue that has to be fixed because this speaks to some level of American overall security, doesn't it?
Very correctly and importantly, you point out it was a bipartisan set of committee chairmen. I'm the chairman of the subcommittee, permanent subcommittee on investigations, which did a lot of the legwork for this investigation. And the solution has to be bipartisan as well. There were four of us, Chairman Gary Peters of Michigan, Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, Rand Paul of Kentucky. Very different ideological views, but yes, absolutely. Going forward, there has to be bipartisan cooperation on this kind of forward-looking review of practices. For example, the allocation of resources by the Secret Service has to be based on risk, on threat assessment, not just on the title of the person they're protecting. And the kinds of allocation of resources has to be based on the kind of assessment that it has to do by somebody in a clear chain of command.
I want to talk about some other things while we have you here. I know this past week you had a meeting with President Zelensky. What's the latest on that effort? Because you've joined us so many times to talk about that effort of funding Ukraine in their fight against Russia and Putin.
The fight against Putin and Russia is at a critical moment because they're beginning the winter when Putin is going to intensify his attacks on their infrastructure, their electric system, their grid. And the people of Ukraine are going to be without lights and power and heat for a lot of this winter. But they need the military arms to counter that aerial attack, missiles, bombs, and to go after the targets deeper within Russia. The president, I hope, will give him that permission. His message to us in the Senate, a bipartisan group, was very strong and stirring. The people of Ukraine are absolutely determined to preserve their freedom, and their fight is our fight. They are fighting for us. They are bleeding and dying on the battlefield so that Putin will not advance against NATO allies, and we should be supporting Ukraine.
And just quickly on that same topic, I know there's been so much discussion about the length they can go with American assistance, where American weapons can be used, how those F-16s that are over there can be used. Is that something that needs to be reconsidered as we move into winter?
I hope that America will give them permission, authority, remove the limits to go deeper into Russian territory with their attacks, because hitting the missile launch sites and the air bases where those attacks are made on Ukraine is a matter of self-defense. And the incursion that they've done into Russia shows that Putin isn't going to escalate. Our fears of his somehow using tactical nuclear weapons are greatly exaggerated. If he's not going to retaliate with nuclear weapons when they go into Russian territory, seizing hundreds of square miles, he's not going to retaliate when Ukraine, in its self-defense, goes after those airfields and missile launch sites.
Just real quickly, we have 30 seconds left. I know you've been working on this Boeing issue too, and so many of us fly and want to know what the latest is on that.
Latest is that the FAA has to do better in its oversight, and Boeing has to put quality and safety over profits and speed of production. And we had the administrator of the FAA into a hearing this week, and we made that point very, very aggressively. It's a bipartisan point.
All right, Senator Richard Blumenthal, a couple of important topics. We appreciate you being with us.
Thank you.